What if every glacier, every frozen sea, and every buried sheet of ancient frost disappeared into liquid blue? What if the ice that has slumbered for millennia awakened as water, reshaping the face of Earth not with fire, but with its silent melt? Today we journey into the haunting beauty and staggering consequence of a world where all the ice is gone. If this story stirs something in you, if the vision of our planet transformed resonates in your bones, then like this video, share it with those who wonder, and let the tides of curiosity ripple onward. In the vast memory of Earth, ice has been both a guardian and a prisoner. Locked within its crystalline veins are whispers of past atmospheres, extinct pollen, ancient ash, the breath of mammoths, and the silence of extinct winters. It crowns the poles like sovereigns of stillness, commanding winds, taming oceans, and shielding the Earth from a fever it was never meant to endure. But ice is not eternal. It is a balance, fragile, deliberate, and now, undone. If every ice sheet collapsed into meltwater, the first to vanish would be the Arctic sea ice. Unlike the glaciers resting on land, this ice already floats, and its disappearance would not raise seas, but its absence would darken the mirror of the North. Where once white surfaces reflected sunlight back to space, now dark ocean would swallow. The warmth, amplifying heat, accelerating change. The Arctic would shift from a regulator to a furnace. Polar bears, seals, walruses, species born from frost, would lose the architecture of their survival. They would drift in memory alone. But it is the land ice, resting heavy upon Greenland, Antarctica, and the mountain spines of every continent, that carries the weight of apocalypse. In Greenland, ice more than 2 miles thick presses into bedrock, a frozen colossus sculpted by time. As it succumbs to rising air and warming seas, it sends vast torrents into the Atlantic. These waters disrupt the ocean conveyor, the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, risking a collapse in weather stability across the globe. Europe may freeze while the tropics swelter. The rains may flee from India, and drought may strangle the lungs of the Amazon. A balance lost is never easily found again. The West Antarctic ice sheet, already trembling on its foundations, rests on ground below sea level. As ocean warmth seeps beneath it, great ice shelves that once anchored its mass calve away, allowing inland ice to slide ever faster into the ocean. Should this sheet melt entirely, it alone would raise global sea levels by more than 3 meters. Coastal cities, New York, Mumbai, Shanghai, Sydney, Rio de Janeiro, would not fight against the waves. They would surrender. Streets would become canals, buildings would drown to their shoulders. Memories and infrastructure would dissolve into brine, and still the seas would rise. The East Antarctic ice sheet, a sleeping giant, holds enough frozen memory to elevate oceans by over 50 meters. Long thought stable, even impervious, signs now show its edges fraying under the pressure of a warming world. Ice cliffs collapse in thunderous slabs. Meltwater rivers carve paths across its surface, accelerating its decline. Should this leviathan melt in full, the very outlines of continents would redraw themselves. Florida would vanish. Bangladesh would submerge. London, Venice, Bangkok, gone. Inland seas would form in places now known for desert. The map of Earth would be rewritten in salt. Glaciers that adorn the Himalayas, the Andes, the Alps, and the Rockies, rivers of time frozen mid-flow, would dissolve into torrents, feeding floods first, then famine. For more than 1 billion people, these frozen heights are lifelines. They birthed the Ganges, the Yangtze, the Indus, the Mekong. Their vanishing would mean the slow death of agriculture, a thirst no dam or canal could quench. Seasonal rhythms would be lost, replaced by chaos and desperation. Beyond the surface, beneath the ice of Antarctica and Greenland, ancient lakes long isolated may be breached. Microbial worlds that evolved in darkness and pressure might awaken, introducing biological unknowns to a world unprepared. These are not just tales of ice, but of biology, chemistry, and ancient memory. Ice is not dead. It breathes slowly. It records. It protects. Its loss is the opening of a vault. As the ice melts, The Earth's weight redistributes. The land, relieved of pressure, rises. This is not poetic, it is tectonic. Scandinavia, once burdened by glacial might, still rises like a memory of weight lifted. With modern melt, the crust will shift again. Earthquakes may rattle unexpected. Places, volcanoes freed of icy lids, may awaken. The planet itself will exhale in response. And then there is the carbon. Locked within permafrost, permanently frozen ground, are vast stores of methane and carbon dioxide, sealed away for tens of thousands of years. As the permafrost thaws, it exhales these gases in sudden, invisible surges. Methane is a greenhouse, gas dozens of times more potent than carbon dioxide over short timescales. What once was a shield becomes a source. Feedback loops spiral. Warming begets thaw, thaw begets gas, gas begets more warming. The oceans, absorbing not just the melt but the heat, will swell. Warmer water expands. Sea levels rise not only from ice but from temperature. Coral reefs, delicate cathedrals of biodiversity, bleach and die. Entire marine ecosystems collapse. Fisheries that feed half the world's population dissolve. The balance of life tilts. Storms grow monstrous with warmer oceans. Hurricanes gather energy, churn longer, strike harder. Floodplains turn to battlegrounds. Islands vanish. Salty seas creep into freshwater aquifers. Soil turns bitter, crops fail, populations move. Human civilization, rooted in coastlines, would face its reckoning. Our oldest cities are ocean-born: Alexandria, Tokyo, Istanbul, San Francisco, Jakarta. All vulnerable, all impermanent. Hundreds of millions of people would be displaced. Wars may be fought not over ideology, but over dry land, fresh water, and food. The refugee crisis of climate would be planetary. And yet amid the devastation, nature does not weep, it transforms. Forests may migrate poleward. New wetlands may rise where cities drowned. Species may vanish, but others may emerge. The Earth is not fragile, it is changing. It does not mourn the ice, it simply reshapes around its absence. But we are not the Earth. We are its guests, brief and vulnerable. Our systems, our architectures, our economies, our cultures, they depend on stability. The melt threatens that stability not just with water but with time. For it may not happen all at once. It may unfold over centuries. But every year a little more vanishes. Every decade the line between land and sea blurs. This is not prophecy. It is physics. It is the story already begun. Satellites capture the retreat. Instruments measure the heat. The melt has started. And though the timeline remains uncertain, the direction is clear. Beneath the hush of the changing world, the rhythm of water becomes a whisper that turns into a roar. The ice, once dormant and eternal, now moves with haste. Not the sudden burst of a storm, but the relentless, unceasing pull of transformation. Glaciers that stood like fortresses begin to crack along their spines, their thunder echoing across valleys once carved by their ancestors. The Earth remembers every curve sculpted by ice, and now it must learn to remember their absence. The loss of ice is not simply subtraction, it is replacement. Where silence once ruled, waves now lap. Where frost once coiled tight around the bones of the land, meltwater spills into places unprepared to hold it. The oceans, vast and tireless, become taller, wider, and more erratic. Their tides reach beyond old boundaries. They claw at the edges of continents, not with malice, but with certainty. The coastlines begin to fade, first subtly, then swiftly. Mangroves that once braced the shores against storm surge are drowned. Salt water creeps inland, poisoning the roots of trees that once bloomed beside the brackish tides. Rice paddies turn to saline wastelands. Estuaries, nurseries of countless species, become chaotic arenas of shifting chemistry. In the space of a few decades, landscapes that nourished civilizations become alien to life. The people who lived with the rhythms of the ice, Inuit, Sami, Sherpa, Indian herders, Siberian nomads, become historians of a world dissolving beneath their feet. The practices of survival handed down for millennia are disrupted. Animal migrations become erratic. Seasonal cues vanish. Ice roads once used to reach remote villages disappear, isolating entire communities. What was once endurance becomes exile. And as lowlands disappear, highlands suffer a different fate. The loss of glaciers in mountain ranges initiates a chain reaction in the skies. The cooling breath of alpine ice had once tempered the air, but now the winds grow fiercer and less predictable. Monsoon cycles shift. Rain arrives where none was expected, and vanishes where it is most needed. Rivers once swollen with glacial melt during dry seasons now shrink to rivulets, powerless to irrigate fields or refill reservoirs. Cities engineered with the stability of past climate in mind begin to falter. Subways flood not from storm, but from tide. Sewage systems collapse under the strain of backflowing sea. Ports, the arteries of global trade, lie submerged, rusting, inert. The cost of protection, of seawalls, of pumps, of elevating streets and buildings, bloats national budgets until protection becomes privilege and abandonment becomes policy. Where wealth builds barriers, the poor retreat or perish. In the delta regions, the Mekong, the Nile, the Ganges, Brahmaputra, tens of millions live within arm's reach of the sea. These places do not fade gradually. They are overwhelmed. Saltwater floods farmland. Homes collapse into the tide. Infrastructure rots. Disease spreads through standing water. Mass migration begins, not from war, but from water. Across the globe, borders strain beneath the weight of climate refugees. Nations unequally responsible for the warming are unequally burdened by its consequences. The world's geometry of responsibility fractures. International tensions sharpen. Rivers shared between nations become points of contention as upstream flow dwindles. Dams rise as political weapons. Access to clean water becomes a strategic objective. And yet, not all. Consequences are drawn in human lines. The melt alters the breath of the planet. The jet stream, once steady and swift, now meanders like a drunken thread across hemispheres. Heat domes stall. Cold snaps plunge south. Storms linger in place, unmoored from former paths. Wildfires burn longer and hotter. Drought settles into new territories, persistent and cruel. Ecosystems, accustomed to seasons, misfire in their timing. Blossoms arrive before bees. Birds migrate to find silence where song should be. In the ocean depths, changes unfold unseen. The salinity and temperature, profiles that guide currents, are distorted. Upwellings falter. The great conveyor belts that move nutrients from the ocean's abyss to its surface weaken. The marine food web, fragile and layered, begins to starve from below. Plankton blooms become erratic. Fish stocks collapse. Predators abandon their ancestral routes. Entire fisheries vanish, taking livelihoods with them. The ice sheets once held equilibrium in place, not through intention, but through mass. Their weight balanced the axis of the Earth. As they melt, the planet's rotational behavior subtly shifts. The distribution of mass across the globe changes. The poles wander. This geophysical rebalancing unfolds in silence, but its impacts, on satellites, on navigation, on tidal patterns, may reach farther than anticipated. Meanwhile, permafrost melt accelerates beyond the Arctic. Siberia and Alaska see entire landscapes buckle as ice within the soil liquefies. Buildings tilt, pipelines rupture, forests collapse as the ground beneath them turns to swamp. Methane bursts from the earth in violent craters. The release is swift, chaotic, and almost impossible to contain. What once took centuries to store, the earth exhales in years. The feedback loops tighten like snares. As more ice melts, less light is reflected. As seas rise, more heat is absorbed. As permafrost thaws, more greenhouse gases are released. Each change feeds the next, a compounding cascade of transformation. The earth is not tipping into change, it is tumbling. Amid this unraveling, human memory becomes a form of grief. Photographs of glaciers, of snow-covered ranges, of icebergs drifting under auroras, become relics of a different age. Museums begin to archive ice cores not only for study, but as testimony. Schools teach about ecosystems that no longer exist. The language of seasons evolves, reflecting new, unstable norms. But the Earth is not ending. It is evolving. The new shorelines will harden into permanence. New climates will define new biomes. Forests will claim ground they never knew. Deserts will stretch across places that once knew rain. Some species will adapt. Others will vanish. Life persists, not in resistance, but in reinvention. And yet, at the heart of this transformation is a question not of ice but of us. What happens when the solid certainties beneath our feet turn fluid? When history written in frost is washed away? When our calendars, our agriculture, our cities, and our myths must all be rewritten to match the warming air? The melt is not only an ending. It is a revelation. It reveals the fragility of human confidence, the illusion of permanence, and the depth of our entanglement with the elements we once thought separate from ourselves. Ice was never only ice. It was memory. It was boundary. It was breath. And now, as it disappears, we are left to reckon with the truth it leaves behind. A truth as fluid as the seas that rise to meet us. In the unfolding silence left by vanishing, the earth begins to echo with the voices of its reshaped balance. The sky, once governed by a measured rhythm of cloud and sun, begins to stir with new patterns. Thicker, heavier clouds weighted with moisture drawn from warming oceans, their vapor tracing fresh trails of disruption. Storms no longer arrive as seasonal guests but linger like uninvited specters, reshaping coastlines, drowning plains, and shattering the symmetry of centuries-old weather. Each droplet of meltwater that escapes the ancient glaciers carries not just temperature, but consequence. It joins with billions of others, swelling the arteries of the global ocean until they pulse with a strange new strength. As ice that once capped the poles becomes part of the sea, the salinity changes, the balance of density shifts, and the slow, ponderous dance of ocean currents begins to stutter. The Atlantic meridional overturning circulation, lifeblood of the global climate engine, teeters on the edge of collapse. Should it falter, the Earth's breath will grow uneven. Western Europe, long warmed by the Gulf Stream, will chill under gray, unrelenting skies. The Sahel, already fragile, may wither into deeper drought. The Amazon may not burn from fire but crumble under the weight of inconsistent rain. As warm water pools in unexpected places, monsoons that nourished billions may fail to arrive or arrive in fury instead of grace. The planet, no longer stirred evenly by the hands of ocean and air, begins to choke on its imbalance. The poles, once twin sentinels of stability, offer two faces of collapse. In the north, the Arctic has lost not just thickness but rhythm. The summer ice that once regrew in predictable measure now returns weaker, more brittle, easily fractured by wind and current. Beneath it, waters once sealed off from sun now warm like shallow seas. Species adapted to cold, walrus, polar bear, narwhal, find their hunting grounds retreating faster than their instincts can evolve. In the south, Antarctica, ancient and immense, breaks not in a single shattering, but in 1,000 fractures. Its ice shelves, the buttresses that slow the march of glaciers to sea, crumble like porcelain under unseen pressure. When the Larsen B ice shelf disintegrated in 2002, it was a prelude. The future holds bigger names, Thwaites, Pine Island, whose collapse could flood global coastlines by several meters. These titanic glaciers are not merely melting, they are being unmoored from the Earth's grip. As they slide, the lithosphere sighs in relief and in consequence. The crust, freed from the immense burden of ice, begins to rise, not in minutes but over years, subtly altering the elevation of landscapes and the course of rivers. This rebound reshapes watersheds. Lakes drain into unexpected valleys. Old riverbeds dry and new ones appear. These shifts, invisible on a daily scale, accumulate into profound geographic rewrites. In this changing canvas, the biosphere stumbles. Coral reefs, already bleached by heat, now contend with rising sea levels that bury them in shadow. Photosynthesis falters in their tissues. The explosion of biodiversity they once supported dissolves. Mangroves, frontline defenders against storm, surge, find their roots waterlogged beyond survival. Their loss invites more erosion, more flooding, more loss. In the tundras, where permafrost once locked away ancient organisms and carbon alike, the ground weeps methane into the sky. These greenhouse gases join the great churn of the atmosphere, strengthening the very forces that began the melt. Insects awaken from dormancy. Bacteria, frozen for tens of thousands of years, find life once more. The land does not return to balance. It cascades into novelty, into instability. The cities, those intricate testaments to human engineering, rise like islands amid encroaching chaos. But they were designed for a climate that no longer exists. Seawalls are raised, but water finds new paths through subway vents, storm drains, and porous foundations. Pumps run day and night, but the tide never sleeps. Roads buckle, foundations crack. Insurance markets collapse as flooding becomes not an event, but a condition. Inland, displaced populations swell the borders of towns, unprepared to receive them. Migration, no longer a crisis of choice but of necessity, surges across continents. Cultures collide not through exploration, but through desperation. Languages blend, resources thin, tensions simmer. Political borders, drawn in eras of stability, become lines of friction. Agriculture strains beneath new skies. The seasons are no longer farmers' allies. Drought deepens in some regions while floods ravage others. Crops fail not for lack of soil, but for lack of predictability. Wheat belts shift toward the poles, but the infrastructure to grow, store, and ship does not follow as swiftly. Global. Food security grows brittle, cracked by the hand of heat and water. Yet among the crumbling, life clings and adapts. Trees creep upward in elevation. Fish migrate into new currents. Microorganisms seize opportunity in novel niches. Evolution stirs under pressure, sculpting new forms where old ones fade. But this rebirth is not peace. It is flux. And through it all, the memory of ice haunts the planet, not only as lost mass but as lost time. The geological patience of glacial cycles has been interrupted by the urgency of industrial fire. The atmosphere carries the fingerprints of combustion in every molecule. The oceans warm not just from above, but from the deep mixing of heat accumulated over decades. The consequences delayed are not avoided. They are amplified. As the Earth tilts deeper into its transformation, human institutions struggle to keep pace. Governance systems designed for borders and budgets falter before global feedback loops. Markets fluctuate wildly as commodities tied to stable seasons, grain, fish, timber, become unreliable. Insurance ceases to offer security. International. Treaties become paper relics in the face of floods, droughts, and famine. Faith, too, is tested. Not just religious faith, but faith in control, in progress, in permanence. Generations raised in the shadow of skyscrapers and supercomputers confront the truth that no edifice, no invention, no algorithm can stem the rising sea. Hope becomes not a strategy, but a choice, a defiance against despair. And yet, within this disquiet, there is clarity. The melt lays bare the illusion that humanity is separate from Earth. We are not passengers on a passive planet. We are threads in the loom of its systems. Our carbon, our heat, our choices, all are woven into the unfolding pattern. The loss of ice is not a punishment. It is a reflection. The mirror it holds does not ask blame alone. It asks recognition. Recognition that the choices of centuries have weight, that the comforts of one age can become the storms of the next. That time, once seen as linear progress, is circular in consequence. And so, as the ice vanishes and the sea rises, we are left with questions chiseled deeper than any glacial trench. How shall we live in a world we have changed? What new myths will arise to explain the absence of snow? Will we find shelter in truth or escape in denial? Can we shape the warming earth with wisdom or only with regret? The answer, like the water, is in motion. Across the continents, the rising seas begin to reclaim what was once borrowed. Ancient deltas, sculpted over millennia by the patient hand of sediment and time, yield to saltwater intrusion. The Mekong, the Nile, the Ganges, arteries of civilization, grow saline at their roots. Rice paddies yellow. Aquifers spoil. Water drawn from the depths is no longer sweet. Villages vanish not through cataclysm, but by the slow drip of inevitability. The coastlines blur, no longer fixed boundaries but breathing margins, swelling with every storm, withdrawing with every tide. What was land yesterday becomes bay tomorrow. The map becomes a living document, redrawn with each passing year. Cartographers no longer speak of permanence, only of flux. Ports shift, harbors deepen. The bones of drowned cities emerge in shallows, where children now swim above the foundations of their ancestors. Islands, once nations, now measure their sovereignty not in acres, but in hours. The Maldives, Kiribati, Tuvalu, names that once evoked turquoise waters and soft winds, become warnings etched into the annals of Earth. Their governments plan for diaspora. Identity becomes portable, a homeland carried not in soil, but in memory. Flags fly above embassies of a future with no ground beneath them. Inland, the loss of ice radiates outward like a stone thrown into a still lake. The Himalayas, often called the Third Pole, retreat in silence. Glaciers that once fed rivers for billions shrink behind veils of dust. The Indus slows, the Yangtze hesitates, the Brahmaputra stutters in its ancient flow. Seasonal rhythms unravel. In spring, floods rage without containment. In summer, droughts deepen without reprieve. These rivers no longer flow from frozen permanence, but from rain, fickle and fractured. Farmers look to skies no longer guided by precedent. Irrigation canals run dry before seeds reach root. Nations eye each other across dwindling watersheds, their histories tangled with cooperation and conflict. Treaties crafted in abundance now groan under scarcity. Farther north, the boreal forests breathe a different air. The permafrost beneath them softens like a page soaked in water. Trees lean at odd angles, drunken forests they're called, roots torn from their frozen grip. Fires race across the taiga with a hunger fed by decades of drying. Flames once rare now carve highways. Through pine and spruce, the smoke climbs into the stratosphere, dimming distant skies and looping back into the jet stream. Within that thawing ground lies a deeper danger. Ancient carbon, frozen in the silence of ice ages, now stirred to life. Methane bubbles rise. From lakes like ghostly exhales, the air thickens invisibly. The feedback loops intensify. What was once held in stasis becomes a catalyst. The Earth warms not by intention, but by momentum. The Arctic Ocean, long locked beneath ice, opens like a wound. New shipping lanes tempt nations with shortcuts and sovereignty. Oil and gas, once unreachable, glimmer beneath the seabed. The same extractive hunger that sparked the thaw now seeks profit in its aftermath. Drilling rigs rise where polar bears once roamed. The irony is sharp but not new. Collapse breeds opportunity, and opportunity feeds collapse. The Antarctic, that last bastion of cold, responds with growing unease. Beneath its vast white surface lie rivers of meltwater, carving tunnels and chambers beneath the shelves. Warm ocean currents slip beneath the ice, eating it from below, invisible and relentless. Glaciers fracture not from above, but from within. The continent groans, a sound unheard but devastating in consequence. As sea levels climb, the weight of the ocean presses differently upon the Earth's crust. Gravity redistributes. Even the rotation of the planet shifts minutely, a subtle wobble born of vanishing mass. Time itself ticks differently, imperceptibly, altered by the redistribution of ice and water. The planet, though vast, is not immune to its own shifting bones. Culture, too, begins to fray beneath the weight of water. Stories tied to frozen landscapes lose their place. Languages spoken only in the shadow of glaciers fall silent as the villages that nurtured them wash away. Songs once sung to mark the first snowfall now echo in climates where winter no longer comes. Elders speak of seasons that no longer exist. Children inherit skies their parents never knew. Yet not all responses are passive. Across the globe, humanity stirs with solutions. Desalination plants rise along salt-choked coasts. Floating farms take root atop floodplains. Seawalls are etched with designs both functional and defiant. Artificial glaciers are sculpted in high-altitude valleys, catching winter in man-made shadows to release it in summer's thirst. Ingenious, temporary, and fragile all at once. Cities reimagine themselves. Venice lifts its buildings. Tokyo re-engineers its riverbeds. Jakarta uproots its heart and moves inland. Urban planners become cartographers of uncertainty, drawing blueprints on shifting tides. Buildings rise on stilts. Roads undulate with the topography of flood models. Cement meets coral in hybrid experiments. Concrete jungles reach for resilience. But resilience has a cost. It is not equitably distributed. Wealth buys elevation. Technology buys time. The margins, the vulnerable, the forgotten, they face the sea with fewer defenses. Climate justice becomes the quiet question beneath every flooded home, every failed harvest. Who bears the brunt of melting ice? Who profits from it? Who is remembered? And who is submerged? Beneath the rising chaos, a philosophical undercurrent emerges. The melting of ice is not merely a physical event, it is a spiritual unmooring. For centuries, the cryosphere symbolized purity, silence, and endurance. To lose it is to lose a mirror that once reflected our ideals of untouched wilderness. The idea that there might be a place on Earth beyond human reach dies with the last glacier. And yet, in that loss, there is revelation. The planet is not a backdrop. It is a partner, a participant, a mirror, and a memory. The melting ice does not end with water. It ends with transformation, not just of geography, but of consciousness. No one is untouched. No one is upstream. In the great feedback loops of climate and life, there are thresholds. Some can be crossed and returned from. Others mark the edge of the irreversible. The vanishing of all Earth's ice is not a singular event. It is a sequence, a crescendo, a requiem. But it is also a beginning, not of a new equilibrium, but of a new awareness. The ice that once moved in silence now speaks in flood and flame. It speaks in salt and heat. It speaks in rising tides and shifting winds. And still, it asks a question. What story will be told of the humans who watched the ice melt? Will it be one of loss alone, or of a world awakened, even as it wept? The oceans swell with the tears of ancient glaciers, and the world tilts toward a new epoch, an age not of ice, but of water. Cities brace themselves against the lapping tides, yet in the low-lying interiors of continents, it is not the sea that dictates fate, but the atmosphere transformed. The great weather engines of Earth, once governed by predictable seasonal cycles, now hum with erratic energy. Storms bloom with a violence that seems biblical, yet they are born of science, of thermodynamics stretched thin. The warm seas, vast and unshackled from their polar boundaries, feed the birth of superstorms, cyclones with eyes wider than cities and wind fields that howl across nations. What was once a Category 3 becomes the baseline. A new vocabulary emerges to describe storms that breach the upper limits of classification. Rain falls in torrents that the soil cannot swallow, and rivers climb their banks with urgency. Floodplains, once fertile, are drowned beneath perpetual inundation. The land forgets the touch of dry sun. In these new hydrological extremes, deserts grow thirstier even as oceans rise. The paradox deepens. As water dominates one realm, it vanishes from another. The Sahara expands. The American Southwest becomes brittle. The Australian outback shrinks from itself. Atmospheric rivers, vast streams of vapor aloft, twist away from their ancestral roots. Rain no longer falls where it once did, and aquifers, ancient and finite, are drawn down to dust. Agriculture, the quiet engine of civilization, trembles beneath this shifting sky. Crops tuned to millennia of climate norms now wither beneath unseasonal frosts or rot under blistering heat. Maize curls in the sun. Wheat heads fail to fill. Rice fields lie fallow, flooded not with nurturing water but with saline ruin. Livestock fall ill, their rhythms broken. A new hunger creeps across fertile valleys that once fed millions. Food security, once the domain of economists and planners, now dances with chaos. Trade networks falter under the weight of climate-induced scarcity. Grain once shipped across oceans now fails to arrive. Political borders strain as nations turn inward, guarding what little remains. The specter of famine does not arrive as a shadow, but as a progression: empty markets, rising prices, unrest. Hunger becomes a language spoken fluently across once prosperous. Climate refugees rise in number, not as a wave but as a tide, persistent, swelling, undeniable. Families leave not just for war or poverty, but because the land itself has betrayed them. Fields once tilled by generations are abandoned to salt. Wells run dry, coasts are erased. People move not with desire, but with necessity. Migration becomes a rhythm of survival. The maps change again, not through redrawing, but through motion. Borders, fixed and imagined, struggle to hold meaning in a world where permanence dissolves. Walls are built and breached. Policies are penned and torn apart. Humanity faces a reckoning not of technology but of empathy. The question rises like heat from pavement. Who is welcome when the sea follows behind? What laws endure when the earth rewrites its terms? Amid this turmoil, ecosystems too cry out in silence. The polar bear, long a symbol, fades from ice that no longer forms in time for the hunt. The emperor penguin returns to breeding grounds now drowned in melt. Coral reefs, those vibrant underwater cities, bleach and crumble under relentless heat. Fish migrate toward poles, leaving behind empty nets and disoriented economies. The balance shifts. Predators lose prey, forests lose rainfall, oceans lose breath. Oxygen zones in the deep sea contract. Acidification, a quiet consequence of rising carbon, eats away at the shells of plankton and mollusks. Food webs unravel. From the base up, the ocean, once a boundless giver, begins to decline. It is not sudden, it is not dramatic, it is relentless. The silence of the sea becomes louder than any storm. Yet within that quiet, there is movement. In laboratories and field stations, on windswept plains and offshore platforms, humanity responds. Solar fields bloom across deserts, turbines spin. In the roaring North Sea, batteries expand like lungs beneath cities, storing the breath of sun and wind. Carbon is captured not just in promise, but in practice. Concrete is reinvented. Steel remembers how to bend without breaking the sky. Architects turn to biomimicry. Buildings breathe like termite mounds. Roofs grow moss and harvest rain. Cities begin to curl inward, compact and walkable, like organisms adapting to new climates. Highways become gardens. Suburbs surrender to vertical forests. The future, once imagined in steel and glass, now blooms in green and grit. Cultural tides shift too. Oil barons become stewards of solar. Narratives change. Success is measured not in growth but in resilience. Consumption slows, not from collapse, but from a collective exhale. Art speaks of recovery, not conquest. Faiths converge around care for creation. The economy finds new roots in regeneration. Still, it is not enough to halt what has already begun. The earth does not turn on intent alone. Sea levels continue their rise, not because of negligence alone, but because of inertia. Glaciers calve, ice shelves crack, permafrost releases its ghosts. The consequences of decisions made centuries ago echo louder than today's solutions. But the path forward is no longer blind. It is lit, in part, by the ice that once reflected the sun. Memory becomes a tool. Museums hold artifacts not only of history, but of climate. A child peers at the fossilized imprint of a glacier, its ridges preserved in sediment like a frozen breath. Grandparents speak of snow that once arrived like a quiet miracle, of ponds that froze thick enough for skates, The stories of ice live on, not just in sorrow, but in wisdom. And still, the world adapts. Floating cities rise, tethered to reefs and designed to rise with the tides. Crops are engineered to sip salt water. New foods grow in vertical towers, illuminated by sun and science. Mars is discussed not as escape, but as a mirror, an ancient Earth gone quiet, a warning dressed in red dust. We look outward not to flee, but to remember. Governance stretches into new shapes. Nations unite under banners of survival rather than dominion. Climate courts hear the cries of the displaced. Laws evolve to recognize the rights of rivers, the personhood of forests, the dignity of future generations. Democracy, long bound by borders, learns to speak the language of the biosphere. Technology does not rescue us. It accompanies us. It illuminates pathways but cannot compel us to walk them. The choice remains ours. In the shadow of melted ice we see ourselves, not as rulers of Earth, but as one thread in its grand tapestry. The melting, the rising, the warming, they are not external forces. They are reflections of our own momentum. What happens when all the ice on Earth melts is not only a tale of science. It is a meditation on time, on cause and consequence, on humility. It is a mirror held to civilization's face. The answer, in the end, is not found in temperature charts or satellite images, but in the beating hearts of those who inherit this thawed world. The story is not yet finished. The seas continue their slow climb. The atmosphere continues its restless churn. But in the silence between disasters, in the stillness that follows every flood, there is a choice to remember, to restore, to reimagine. The thaw of Earth's frozen realms ushers in a reshaping not just of landscapes, but of the very fabric of life. The rhythm of seasons, once governed by ice and snow, shifts into unfamiliar patterns. Spring arrives earlier, tentative and uncertain, then retreats abruptly as errant frosts visit gardens unannounced. Autumn lingers, a golden haze uncertain whether to embrace warmth or surrender to cold. This new cadence unsettles creatures great and small, whose life cycles are entwined with the steady pulse of the planet. Birds migrate on altered schedules, sometimes too soon, finding barren branches where fruit once ripened. Pollinators emerge before flowers bloom or linger after they have faded, breaking the delicate synchrony of nature's partnership. Amphibians awaken from hibernation prematurely, exposed to chill or drought. The invisible clockwork of biology, calibrated over eons, now ticks in disarray. In the tundra, the melting permafrost awakens ancient microbes in the release of greenhouse gases, but also stirs unexpected life. Wildflowers creep into spaces once bound by ice, painting the landscape with tentative color. Small mammals venture, farther north chased by warming air. Predators follow and a new mosaic of ecosystems takes shape, a fragile patchwork of adaptation and loss. Beneath the waves, coral reefs strive to survive in warming seas. Some colonies bleach and crumble, others demonstrate resilience, hosting symbiotic algae more tolerant to heat. These underwater cities flicker between collapse and renewal, a testament to nature's stubborn will to endure. Fish species, once confined to tropical latitudes, migrate poleward, challenging existing food webs and the economies dependent on them. The ocean's chemical balance teeters under acidification, which weakens the shells of tiny creatures that form the base of marine food chains. As these populations decline, the effects ripple upward, threatening fish, seabirds, and mammals. Whale migrations shift, and the songs they sing echo through unfamiliar waters. The ocean, vast and deep, feels both vulnerable and vital, a living barometer of the planet's health. On land, forests face their own trials. Trees stressed by heat and drought become susceptible to pests and disease. Massive bark beetle outbreaks turn green canopies into tinderboxes, fueling wildfires that scorch millions of acres. Fire seasons lengthen, flames race across landscapes, and smoke chokes cities far from the blazes. The smell of burning wood becomes a seasonal certainty, a reminder of nature's fragility. Yet in the shadow of these calamities, new life finds footholds. Seeds adapted to changing climates take root. Ecological succession paints burned forests with grasses and shrubs, a slow but sure healing. Species once thought doomed show surprising. Resilience or shift ranges, a testament to the relentless pulse of evolution. Human communities, too, transform. In flood-prone regions, floating homes and amphibious architecture offer refuge from rising waters. Urban planners embed nature into cityscapes, green roofs, permeable pavements, urban wetlands, to manage stormwater and cool heat islands. Communities revive traditional knowledge of land stewardship, blending it with modern science to foster resilience. Energy systems pivot. Solar panels blanket rooftops. Wind turbines spin in fields and offshore. The grid grows smarter, managing variable renewables with efficiency. Electric vehicles replace fossil fuel engines, quieting cities and cutting emissions. Innovations in battery storage and green hydrogen promise a cleaner future, but their widespread adoption depends on political will and equitable access. Governments grapple with the complexity of climate-induced migration, crafting policies to protect those displaced by rising seas and desertification. The global community debates responsibility and reparations, recognizing that the burden of climate change falls unevenly. Vulnerable nations seek justice while wealthier countries face the challenge of leadership and accountability. Education evolves to include climate literacy, preparing new generations to live with uncertainty and change. Art and storytelling reflect the shifting world, capturing loss, hope, and adaptation. Music, literature, and visual arts become vehicles for climate awareness and emotional connection, bridging science and soul. In science, research intensifies to understand feedback loops and tipping points, those thresholds beyond which change accelerates beyond control. Satellite monitoring, climate modeling, and field studies deepen knowledge, guiding policy and adaptation efforts. But uncertainty remains, a reminder that the future is not fixed but shaped by human choices. The thawed world invites reflection on humanity's place within nature. No longer masters over frozen frontiers, people become participants in a dynamic system, vulnerable and interdependent. This awareness fosters a sense of stewardship, a recognition that survival depends on respect, humility, and collaboration. The melting ice, once a distant phenomenon, now touches every aspect of life. It challenges assumptions of stability and progress, urging reconsideration of growth and consumption. The interconnectedness of water, air, soil, and life becomes undeniable, a web fragile yet tenacious. In this new chapter, resilience is not merely resistance but transformation, a willingness to evolve with changing circumstances. The journey is arduous, filled with loss and discovery, grief and renewal. The world is reshaped but not defeated. It offers a testament to the enduring dance between change and continuity, between vulnerability and strength. The question remains, how will humanity answer this call? The melting of all Earth's ice is not the end, but a profound beginning, an invitation to reimagine a future where coexistence replaces dominion, where harmony emerges from upheaval, and where hope is forged in the crucible of change. As the glaciers vanish and the polar caps shrink to distant memories, the deep cycles of Earth's climate begin to pivot toward new norms. The cryosphere, once a vast and glistening blanket of ice, ceases to reflect the sun's rays back into space as it did for millennia. Instead, the dark oceans and exposed land absorb heat, amplifying warming in a feedback loop that accelerates change beyond what previous generations could foresee. This albedo effect, simple in concept but profound in consequence, drives temperatures higher, reshaping weather, habitats, and human societies alike. In the high latitudes, the melting of permafrost unleashes more than just trapped carbon dioxide and methane. It reveals the relics of ancient life, frozen forests, long-buried soils, and the remnants of creatures from an epoch before humans. These thawed grounds become both a source of nutrients and a stage for ecological upheaval. Plants long stifled by cold begin to grow, while invasive species from warmer zones push northward, rewriting the botanical map of the Arctic. This ecological migration does not come without conflict. Species once isolated by ice barriers now compete for territory and resources. The Arctic fox and the red fox, once separated by cold, clash over hunting grounds. Birds of prey extend their reach. New predator-prey dynamics emerge, unsettling long-established balances. The Arctic becomes a crucible of evolutionary pressure, where survival hinges on adaptation or retreat. Meanwhile, the loss of sea ice alters the livelihoods of indigenous peoples who have thrived in harmony with the frozen environment. Hunting, fishing, and cultural practices rooted in ice landscapes face disruption. Communities relocate, traditions transform, and identity itself evolves amid the thaw. The human story entwines with the land's transformation, a reminder that climate change is not abstract, but deeply personal. Farther south, the mighty glaciers of mountain ranges, Himalayas, Andes, Rockies, continue their retreat, jeopardizing the water supply for billions. These glaciers act as natural reservoirs, releasing meltwater during dry seasons to sustain rivers and agriculture. Their loss threatens food security, hydroelectric power, and freshwater access. Rivers once fed by steady glacial flow now run erratically, flooding in spring, trickling to drought in summer, testing the resilience of downstream populations. The high-altitude melting fuels another silent but significant hazard. The destabilization of mountain slopes and the increased risk of landslides and glacial lake outburst floods. As ice retreats, natural dams formed by moraines can give way, suddenly, releasing torrents that sweep away villages and infrastructure. These disasters are swift, unpredictable, and devastating, a harsh reminder that climate impacts extend beyond gradual warming. On the oceans, the changing currents paint a complex picture. The melting of polar ice injects fresh water into the seas, diluting salinity and disrupting the thermohaline circulation, often described as Earth's global conveyor belt of heat and nutrients. If this circulation weakens or shifts, it could cause dramatic changes in regional climates. Western Europe, warmed for centuries by the Gulf Stream, might cool unexpectedly. Monsoon patterns in Asia could fluctuate, affecting agriculture and billions of lives. The ripple effects underscore the interconnectedness of Earth's systems. Sea levels, meanwhile, continue their inexorable rise. Coastal cities like Miami, Mumbai, Shanghai, and Lagos confront a future of encroaching waters. Infrastructure crumbles beneath the waves. Underground utilities flood. Roads become rivers. Governments invest billions in seawalls, pumps, and barriers, but nature's persistence often overwhelms human efforts. Managed retreat becomes a strategy where communities are relocated inland, sometimes against deep cultural ties to place. The human response to rising seas is varied. Some innovate with floating homes and amphibious architecture. Others fortify existing defenses. The shoreline becomes a contested space where economic interests, cultural heritage, and environmental necessity collide. Wetlands, those natural buffers that absorb storm surges and filter water, are drained for development, weakening defenses and amplifying flood risks. Yet, the story of ice melting is not solely one of loss. It is also one of opportunity and renewal. The opening of Arctic sea routes, once locked in ice, promises new avenues for commerce and exploration, but also demands stewardship to prevent environmental degradation. New fisheries emerge as species migrate, offering sustenance but also requiring careful management to avoid overexploitation. Scientific research accelerates in these newly accessible regions, revealing secrets of Earth's past climate and ecosystem. Resilience. Technologies such as remote sensing, autonomous underwater vehicles, and climate modeling improve understanding and prediction, empowering adaptation strategies. International cooperation grows as nations recognize shared stakes in a changing Arctic and beyond. On a global scale, the melting ice compels a re-evaluation of humanity's relationship with the planet. The scale of transformation invites humility, a recognition that Earth's systems are not infinite nor immune to human influence. The thaw becomes a catalyst for sustainable innovation, from renewable energy to regenerative agriculture, from circular economies to conservation corridors. Culture shifts as well, with storytelling and art bearing witness to the vanishing ice and rising seas. Indigenous voices, long marginalized, gain prominence as essential guides in understanding and adapting to change. Their knowledge, interwoven with the land, enriches scientific inquiry and inspires broader societal reflection. Ultimately, the melting of all the ice on Earth is a narrative woven from threads of science, society, ecology, and spirit. It challenges old assumptions and demands new ways of thinking about growth, progress, justice, and survival. The planet's frozen heart thaws, and with it, the urgency to act with wisdom and care deepens. The journey ahead is uncertain, shaped by choices yet to be made. Yet in the great unfolding story, the potential for renewal remains, if humanity listens, learns, and embraces a future where coexistence with Earth is not an ideal, but a necessity. Beneath the vast expanse of melting ice lies a transformed hydrological cycle, a world where water flows with new intensity, patterns, and consequences. Rivers swollen by glacial melt race downstream, carving deeper channels and reshaping floodplains. Some river basins, once sustained by steady glacial runoff, face seasonal extremes, violent floods in spring and parching droughts in summer, challenging ecosystems and human societies alike. The surging meltwaters invigorate some wetlands and floodplains, bringing nutrients and life to fertile lands. Yet elsewhere, the unpredictability of flows leads to soil erosion, crop failure, and loss of habitat. Farmers confront uncertain planting seasons, adapting through irrigation innovations and crop diversification. In regions where agriculture underpins livelihoods, this hydrological volatility threatens food security and economic stability. As glaciers recede, new lakes form, some tranquil and beautiful, others precariously perched behind unstable moraines. These glacial lakes carry a hidden danger. Sudden bursts of water can unleash destructive floods downstream, catching communities unprepared. Early warning systems and hazard mapping become critical tools in protecting lives and property, yet their reach often falls short in remote or under-resourced areas. The shifting distribution of freshwater also intensifies geopolitical tensions. Transboundary rivers originating in glacier-fed mountains sustain millions across multiple countries. As flow regimes alter, water-sharing agreements strain, sparking disputes and requiring diplomacy rooted in cooperation and shared stewardship. Water, once abundant and predictable, becomes a precious and contested resource. Ocean circulation, too, reflects the imprint of melting ice. The influx of fresh water into the North Atlantic dilutes surface salinity, potentially disrupting the Atlantic meridional overturning circulation. AMOC, a key driver of global climate patterns. A slowdown or collapse of the AMOC could alter rainfall distribution, hurricane intensity, and temperature regimes across continents, emphasizing the far-reaching impact of polar thaw. Marine ecosystems adjust to these new conditions. Species, accustomed to cold, nutrient-rich waters, migrate or diminish, while others expand their ranges, altering food webs. Fisheries, vital for global nutrition and economies, face shifting stocks and uncertain yields. Sustainable management demands flexible policies informed by science and local knowledge, balancing ecological health with human needs. Sea level rise, propelled by melting ice and thermal expansion, challenges the resilience of coastal ecosystems. Mangroves, salt marshes, and coral reefs, natural buffers against storms and erosion, struggle to keep pace with rising waters. Their degradation exacerbates vulnerability, inviting a vicious cycle of loss. Restoration efforts, combining habitat protection with community engagement, seek to bolster these vital systems. Urban centers on coastlines confront mounting risks. Infrastructure designed for a stable climate faces increasing stress. Stormwater systems flood, transport networks falter, and energy grids become vulnerable. Climate adaptation integrates green infrastructure, parks, wetlands, permeable surfaces that absorb water and reduce heat, creating livable and sustainable cities. The social fabric weaves tighter as communities collaborate to meet challenges. Indigenous knowledge and modern science merge to craft adaptive strategies, respectful of culture and environment. Grassroots movements advocate for climate justice, emphasizing that those least responsible often bear the greatest burdens. The quest for equity shapes policy debates and global agreements. Technological innovation accelerates. Climate modeling improves with data from satellites and sensors, enhancing prediction and response. Renewable energy deployment expands, reducing carbon footprints and slowing warming. Carbon capture and storage, alongside nature-based solutions like reforestation and wetland restoration, offer pathways to mitigate impacts. Education and communication evolve, fostering climate literacy across ages and cultures. Art and storytelling humanize data, connecting hearts and minds to the unfolding crisis. In this shared narrative, hope is nurtured alongside urgency, empowering, action rooted in empathy and responsibility. The melting ice reveals not only vulnerability, but possibility, a call to reimagine humanity's role on Earth. In embracing this responsibility, new alliances form between nations, communities, and ecosystems. The story is one of transformation, resilience, and interconnection, where survival depends on wisdom, cooperation, and a profound respect for the planet's fragile balance. The disappearance of Earth's ice reshapes atmospheric patterns, invoking changes that ripple across continents and oceans alike. The jet streams, those powerful high-altitude rivers of wind that guide weather systems, alter their courses as temperature gradients between the poles and the equator weaken. This shift brings longer, more intense heat waves, prolonged droughts, and erratic storms, crafting a climate tapestry that defies previous expectations. Regions once blessed with predictable seasons find their rhythms disrupted. Summers extend relentlessly, parching soils and straining water supplies. Winters grow unpredictable, sometimes milder, sometimes punctuated by sudden, fierce cold snaps. As atmospheric waves meander, this chaotic dance challenges ecosystems, agriculture, and infrastructure, demanding resilience and adaptability. In the Arctic, the loss of ice magnifies warming, a phenomenon known as Arctic amplification. As sunlight no longer reflects from gleaming ice, dark ocean surfaces absorb heat, fueling further melting in a self-reinforcing cycle. This rapid warming accelerates permafrost thaw, releasing potent greenhouse gases like methane, which in turn intensify global warming. The interconnectedness of these processes reveals the delicate balance upon which Earth's climate rests. The thawing landscape opens new migration corridors for flora and fauna, enabling some species to expand their ranges northward or to higher elevations. Yet, for many others, specialized habitats vanish. Polar bears reliant on sea ice for hunting, seals face shrinking territories and longer fasting periods. Ice-dependent seals and walruses lose crucial breeding grounds. The fragile web of Arctic life trembles under pressure. In temperate and tropical zones, the impacts of melting ice manifest in subtler but equally profound ways. Changing rainfall. Patterns alter river flows and groundwater recharge, affecting drinking water and irrigation. Forests confront shifts in species composition and vulnerability to pests and wildfires. Coral reefs, stressed by warming waters and acidification, bleach and diminish, threatening marine biodiversity and coastal livelihoods. Human health, too, feels the consequences. Heat waves increase heat-related illnesses and mortality. Changes in vector-borne diseases arise as mosquitoes and ticks expand into new territories. Food and water security become more tenuous, fueling migration and conflict. Vulnerable populations, elderly, children, marginalized communities, bear disproportionate burdens, highlighting the urgency for inclusive adaptation. The loss of ice also unveils new economic and geopolitical frontiers. The Arctic's retreat opens shipping lanes once locked in ice, shortening global trade routes and igniting competition for access to untapped resources, oil, gas, minerals, and fisheries. Sovereignty claims and environmental concerns intersect, requiring delicate diplomacy and international governance. Efforts to balance economic interests with environmental protection become a central challenge. Sustainable development in these fragile regions demands collaboration, precaution, and respect for indigenous peoples' rights and knowledge. The potential for exploitation threatens to accelerate degradation unless carefully managed. Technological advances provide tools for monitoring and mitigating impacts. Satellite observations track ice loss, sea level rise, and ecosystem changes with increasing precision. Climate models simulate future scenarios, guiding policy and preparedness. Renewable energy projects reduce dependence on fossil fuels, aiming to slow warming and buy time. Societal shifts embrace sustainability, conservation, and resilience. Cities invest in green infrastructure and climate-smart planning. Communities cultivate local food systems and water conservation. Education fosters climate awareness and proactive stewardship, empowering individuals and institutions alike. Culturally, the melting ice inspires reflection and creativity. Artists, writers, and filmmakers capture the poignant beauty and fragility of a transforming world. Storytelling becomes a bridge, connecting science and emotion, past and future, human and nature. The Earth's ice is more than frozen water. It is a symbol of balance and stability. Its loss challenges humanity to rethink progress, consumption, and connection. The path forward demands courage, innovation, and solidarity to honor the planet's resilience and secure a livable future. The gradual disappearance of Earth's ice profoundly influences the ocean's chemistry, stirring changes that cascade through marine ecosystems and affect the entire biosphere. As glaciers and ice sheets melt, they discharge vast volumes of fresh water into the salty seas, altering salinity levels that regulate ocean currents and biological processes. This dilution affects the density-driven circulation that distributes heat and nutrients, potentially disrupting the delicate equilibrium that sustains life beneath the waves. With shifting salinity and temperature gradients, phytoplankton, microscopic, marine plants at the base of the food web experience altered growth patterns. These tiny organisms, responsible for producing nearly half of the planet's oxygen and sequestering carbon dioxide, serve as the foundation for oceanic life. Changes in their abundance and distribution ripple upward, impacting fish, mammals, and seabirds dependent on them. Warming waters lead to coral bleaching, a distress signal when corals expel the symbiotic algae that nourish them. Bleached reefs lose their vibrant colors and structural integrity, becoming vulnerable to disease and death. As biodiversity hotspots and natural barriers against storms, coral reefs' decline jeopardizes food security, coastal protection, and livelihoods for millions worldwide. The shifting seas also influence migratory routes and breeding grounds of marine species. Fish populations move toward cooler poles, altering fisheries' geographic focus and challenging management regimes. Some species thrive, while others face decline or extinction. The resulting economic and ecological instability calls for adaptive governance rooted in science and community engagement. Ocean acidification, a consequence of increased atmospheric carbon dioxide dissolving into seawater, compounds these challenges. The lowering of pH impairs calcifying organisms, shellfish, plankton, and corals, weakening their shells and skeletons. This chemical shift threatens the structural fabric of marine ecosystems and the services they provide, from supporting fisheries to maintaining biodiversity. The melting ice also exposes the seafloor in regions previously cloaked by ice shelves. Subglacial landscapes, once hidden, reveal complex topography and ecosystems adapted to extreme conditions. Studying these newly accessible areas advances understanding of Earth's history and resilience, offering clues to past climate shifts and biological survival. In the polar regions, the loss of ice shelves and sea ice transforms habitat for iconic species. Seals, penguins, and polar bears confront habitat loss and altered prey availability. Their survival hinges on the intricate balance of ice, ocean, and prey species, a balance increasingly disrupted by warming. Conservation efforts strive to protect these species through habitat preservation, research, and policy. Human communities that rely on marine resources face uncertain futures. Coastal fisheries, tourism, and transportation industries must adapt to evolving ocean conditions. Sustainable practices, investment in resilience, and diversification of livelihoods become vital strategies in navigating this transition. Global efforts to mitigate climate change emphasize reducing greenhouse gas emissions, transitioning to renewable energy, and enhancing carbon sinks through reforestation and soil management. International agreements seek to unify action, though challenges persist in balancing development, equity, and environmental stewardship. The unfolding changes to Earth's ice and oceans underscore the interconnectedness of natural and human systems. They remind us that the fate of one influences the fate of all. Amid these transformations, the opportunity emerges to redefine humanity's relationship with nature, embracing stewardship, humility, and innovation. The story of melting ice is not merely a chronicle of loss, but a call to awaken to responsibility and possibility. It challenges us to envision a world where thriving ecosystems and human societies coexist in harmony, guided by respect for the fragile balance that sustains life on Earth. The melting of Earth's ice reserves profoundly affects global sea levels, reshaping coastlines and threatening the very existence of low-lying lands. As glaciers and ice sheets release water into the oceans, the steady rise of sea levels accelerates, swallowing islands and coastal plains that have long been homes to diverse communities and ecosystems. This slow but relentless encroachment alters geography, culture, and economies, forcing humanity to confront new realities. Coastal cities, many of which harbor millions of people and serve as economic hubs, face unprecedented challenges. Flood defenses designed for historical sea levels strain under increasing pressure. Storm surges, amplified by higher baselines, breach barriers, inundating streets and infrastructure. The cost of protection, relocation, or rebuilding escalates, testing governance and resilience. In some regions, saltwater intrusion contaminates freshwater aquifers, threatening drinking water supplies and agriculture. Farmers grapple with soil salinization, reducing crop yields and jeopardizing food security. Fishing communities confront shifting marine habitats and declining catches, undermining livelihoods rooted in the delicate balance of land and sea. The cultural heritage embedded in coastal landscapes, historic sites, traditional ways of life, sacred places, faces the risk of disappearance. Indigenous and local communities bear disproportionate impacts, often with limited resources to adapt. Their knowledge and stewardship become essential assets in crafting sustainable responses. Ecosystems along coastlines experience profound transformations. Wetlands, mangroves, and coral reefs, natural buffers against erosion and storms, are inundated or stressed by rising waters. Their decline diminishes biodiversity and reduces the natural protection they provide. Efforts to restore and conserve these habitats gain urgency, recognizing their role in mitigating impacts and supporting resilience. The human response to rising seas involves a spectrum of strategies: building seawalls and levees, restoring natural buffers, implementing managed retreat, and designing resilient infrastructure. Each approach carries trade-offs in cost, social impact, and environmental consequences. The choice of pathways requires inclusive dialogue and careful planning. At the international level, the prospect of climate refugees, people displaced by rising seas and environmental degradation, raises ethical, legal, and humanitarian questions. Nations and communities must prepare to address migration with compassion and fairness, recognizing the shared responsibility for a warming planet. Scientific research advances understanding of ice dynamics and sea level projections, informing policy and adaptation. Technologies such as improved satellite monitoring and modeling enhance early warning systems and risk assessment. Collaboration among scientists, policymakers, and communities fosters innovative solutions. Education and public awareness campaigns play a critical role in building support for mitigation and adaptation. By connecting individuals to the tangible effects of melting ice and sea level rise, these efforts inspire action and foster resilience. The melting ice and rising seas serve as stark reminders of the interdependence between natural systems and human well-being. They challenge us to reconsider how we inhabit the planet, urging stewardship grounded in respect, equity, and foresight. The future of coastal regions will depend not only on scientific and engineering solutions, but on the capacity to envision sustainable, just, and adaptive societies. This transformation invites hope as well as vigilance, resilience as well as reflection. The dramatic retreat of glaciers and polar ice caps signals profound changes, not only to landscapes, but also to Earth's climate feedback loops, intensifying the pace of global warming. One of the critical feedback mechanisms lies in the alteration of Earth's albedo, the reflectivity of its surface. Ice and snow, with their bright reflective surfaces, bounce a significant portion of sunlight back into space, helping to regulate the planet's temperature. As ice diminishes, darker ocean and land surfaces absorb more solar energy, accelerating warming in a cycle that feeds upon itself. This feedback intensification is especially pronounced in the Arctic, where temperatures are rising at twice the beta global average. The shrinking ice exposes open waters that soak up sunlight, causing further ice melt in a rapidly escalating spiral. The resulting warming disrupts weather patterns far beyond the polar regions, influencing jet streams, monsoons, and storm tracks across the globe. The cascading effects underscore the interconnectedness of Earth's climate systems and the central role that ice plays in maintaining balance. Permafrost, the frozen ground beneath much of the Arctic and subarctic, also succumbs to warming, releasing trapped greenhouse gases such as methane and carbon dioxide. These emissions contribute significantly to the greenhouse effect, compounding anthropogenic climate change and further destabilizing global temperatures. Scientists monitor permafrost thaw closely, recognizing it as a potential tipping point with wide-reaching consequences. In the southern hemisphere, Antarctica's ice shelves play a crucial role in buttressing the continent's massive ice sheet. As warming waters eat away at the undersides of these ice shelves, their structural integrity weakens, hastening the flow of inland glaciers toward the ocean. The accelerated loss contributes to rising sea levels, with projections indicating potentially meters of rise over coming centuries if current trends continue. The interaction between melting ice and ocean dynamics introduces uncertainties into climate forecasting. The influx of fresh water from melting glaciers alters ocean salinity and density, affecting major currents like the Atlantic Meridional Overturning Circulation, AMOC. This current regulates heat distribution between hemispheres and stabilizes regional climates. A slowdown or disruption could cause severe weather anomalies, such as colder winters in Europe and more intense storms in the tropics. The melting ice also influences biodiversity. Habitats dependent on cold, stable conditions face threats, as species must adapt, migrate, or face extinction. Some cold-adapted species, like the Arctic fox or certain cold-water fish, confront shrinking ranges and competition from temperate species moving poleward. Ecosystem dynamics shift, creating new balances yet often accompanied by losses in diversity. Human communities, especially indigenous peoples, experience cultural and socioeconomic impacts. Many rely on ice-covered landscapes for subsistence, hunting, travel, and cultural identity. The loss of ice challenges these traditions and requires adaptation strategies rooted in respect for indigenous knowledge and rights. Globally, the melting ice acts as a stark signal of environmental change, galvanizing scientific research, policy action, and public awareness. Efforts to mitigate further warming through emission reductions, alongside adaptation to unavoidable impacts, become paramount. Technological innovations, from carbon capture to renewable energy deployment, advance alongside international agreements aimed at limiting temperature rise. The narrative of melting ice is thus not merely one of loss, but of a call to collective responsibility. It demands a reimagining of humanity's relationship with the natural world, embracing sustainability, equity, and foresight to protect the fragile balance that supports life on Earth. As the ice melts and seas rise, the world's great rivers feel the shifting pulse of a changing planet. Glaciers act as natural reservoirs, slowly releasing fresh water during warmer months, sustaining river flows and supporting ecosystems and human communities downstream. Without these glaciers, rivers run low or dry during critical periods, imperiling agriculture, drinking water, and hydroelectric power generation for millions. In mountain regions such as the Himalayas, Andes, and Rockies, glacial retreat is striking. The loss threatens water security for vast populations relying on snowmelt-fed rivers that cross national boundaries, creating potential for resource conflicts and humanitarian crises. The complex interplay of climate, geography, and human demand requires innovative cooperation and management. Beyond water supply, the sediment and minerals carried by glacial meltwaters nourish fertile floodplains and deltas, sustaining agriculture and biodiversity. Changes in sediment transport disrupt these natural cycles, causing erosion or sediment buildup, altering habitats and infrastructure. Coastal deltas, where many of the world's major cities stand, become vulnerable to sinking and saltwater intrusion, compounding sea level rise threats. The changing hydrology affects fish and aquatic species, whose life cycles depend on seasonal flows. Altered timing and volume of water pulses disrupt spawning, migration, and feeding patterns, threatening species survival and the fishing industries reliant upon them. Cold water species struggle as river temperatures rise, while invasive species expand, reshaping aquatic communities. Hydropower generation, a significant source of renewable energy in many regions, faces uncertainties. Reduced glacial melt decreases river flow during dry seasons, reducing energy output and challenging grid reliability. Energy planning must incorporate these climate-driven changes to maintain sustainable power supplies. Human societies grapple with adapting to these water challenges. Infrastructure must evolve to manage variability and scarcity, from improved storage systems to water conservation and reuse. Transboundary water governance gains importance, requiring cooperation among nations sharing river basins. Innovations in water management, combining traditional knowledge and modern technology, offer pathways toward resilience. Monitoring systems, predictive modeling, and adaptive policies inform decisions to balance ecological health with human needs. The melting ice, by altering river systems, connects distant mountain glaciers with coastal cities, illustrating the global reach of climate change. It reminds us that water, the essence of life, is intricately linked to the frozen reservoirs atop Earth's peaks. In confronting these changes, humanity faces choices: to embrace sustainable stewardship and cooperation, or to endure escalating conflict and scarcity. The shifting rivers are both a challenge and an invitation to protect, innovate, and harmonize with nature's rhythms. The thawing of Earth's ice profoundly alters atmospheric circulation, weaving new patterns into the very fabric of global weather. The polar vortex, a vast spiral of winds encircling the Arctic and Antarctic, depends on temperature contrasts between cold poles and warmer mid-latitudes to maintain its strength and position. As Arctic ice melts and the polar atmosphere warms, disproportionately, these temperature gradients weaken, causing the vortex to destabilize and meander. This destabilization leads to a greater frequency of extreme weather events in temperate regions. Winters can become unusually cold or stormy as cold polar air dips further south, while summers may grow hotter and drier. Such erratic shifts disrupt agricultural cycles, strain infrastructure, and threaten ecosystems accustomed to more stable climates. Jet streams, high-altitude winds guiding weather systems also respond to changing thermal gradients. Their altered paths can stall weather fronts, leading to prolonged droughts, floods, or heat waves. These persistent conditions challenge water management, food production, and disaster preparedness worldwide. Melting ice contributes to increased moisture in the atmosphere, fueling powerful storms and hurricanes. Warmer seas energize these tempests, which gain intensity and precipitation capacity. Coastal regions endure greater flooding and damage, highlighting vulnerabilities amplified by rising seas. The changing atmospheric dynamics impact air quality and human health. Heat waves increase heat-related illnesses, while disrupted weather can concentrate pollutants or trigger wildfires. Vulnerable populations, including the elderly and economically disadvantaged, face disproportionate risks. Scientists employ sophisticated climate models to understand and predict these complex interactions. Yet uncertainties remain, underscoring the need for continuous observation and research to improve forecasting and adaptation strategies. International collaboration on climate monitoring and disaster response strengthens resilience. Early warning systems, emergency preparedness, and community engagement become vital components in safeguarding lives and livelihoods. The interplay between melting ice and atmospheric patterns exemplifies the cascading effects of climate change, where shifts in one domain ripple across others. It calls for integrated approaches that recognize the Earth as an interconnected system, demanding holistic solutions. In embracing this perspective, humanity can better anticipate challenges and design adaptive, equitable responses. The atmosphere's changing rhythms remind us of nature's delicate balance and the shared responsibility to nurture it. The disappearance of Earth's ice unveils new frontiers beneath once impenetrable frozen expanses, exposing landscapes and ecosystems that have been locked away for millennia. As glaciers retreat and ice shelves collapse, ancient soils, rock formations, and even remnants of prehistoric life emerge into the light, offering a unique window into Earth's deep past. These newly revealed environments provide scientists with invaluable clues about past climate shifts, geological processes, and biological evolution. Fossils trapped in ice and permafrost preserve evidence of species that thrived during previous warm periods, helping to forecast how current ecosystems might adapt or collapse under ongoing warming. Moreover, the melting ice uncovers rich mineral deposits, potential fossil fuel reserves, and other natural resources that were previously inaccessible. This opens a complex chapter of geopolitical interest and environmental concern, as nations and corporations eye these resources for extraction, risking ecological damage and exacerbating climate challenges. In the polar regions, the opening of new shipping routes through melting sea ice reshapes global trade and military strategies. The Northwest Passage and Northern Sea Route shorten maritime journeys between continents, offering economic opportunities but also raising environmental and sovereignty issues. These emerging pathways increase the risk of pollution, invasive species, and accidents in fragile Arctic and Antarctic ecosystems. The fragile balance of life in these regions requires robust international governance to ensure sustainable use and protection. Scientific exploration benefits from easier access, enabling deeper study of Earth's climate systems, oceanography, and biodiversity. However, increased human presence also poses threats of disturbance and contamination, necessitating stringent environmental protocols. Indigenous communities in polar and mountainous areas face both opportunities and challenges. Enhanced access may bring economic development, but also cultural disruption and environmental risks. Their participation in decision-making processes is critical to respecting rights and fostering sustainable futures. The unveiling of these new landscapes illustrates the dual nature of ice melt, revealing secrets of the past and opening doors to uncertain futures. It highlights the need for balance between exploration, conservation, and responsible stewardship. As humanity ventures into these newly accessible realms, a profound ethical imperative emerges: to protect these pristine environments while advancing knowledge and cooperation for the common good. The great ice sheets and glaciers serve as vital regulators of Earth's global climate, acting as thermostats that stabilize temperature fluctuations. Their mass and extent influence ocean currents, atmospheric circulation, and even patterns of precipitation worldwide. As these icy giants recede, The intricate balance they maintain is disrupted, leading to profound and unpredictable climatic shifts. One of the key mechanisms affected by melting ice is the thermohaline circulation, often called the global conveyor belt, a vast system of ocean currents driven by differences in temperature and salinity. Freshwater influx from melting glaciers dilutes ocean salinity, potentially slowing this circulation. The consequences ripple globally, impacting climate zones far from the polar regions. The slowing of ocean currents could reduce heat transport to the poles and tropics, altering weather systems and disrupting ecosystems reliant on stable conditions. Regions such as Western Europe, which benefit from the warming effects of currents, like the Gulf Stream, might experience cooler climates despite overall global warming. Melting ice also affects the seasonal cycles of carbon uptake and release. Cold polar waters absorb significant amounts of atmospheric carbon dioxide, serving as carbon sinks that help regulate greenhouse gas levels. Changes in temperature and salinity can reduce the ocean's capacity to sequester carbon, exacerbating atmospheric concentrations and accelerating warming. These feedback loops exemplify the complexity of Earth's climate system, where changes in one component cascade through interconnected processes. They underscore the urgency of understanding and mitigating human impacts to prevent crossing critical tipping points. Furthermore, the retreat of ice alters habitats for species adapted to cold environments. Polar bears, seals, and penguins face shrinking hunting grounds and breeding areas. The loss of ice also affects plankton populations that form the foundation of marine food webs, threatening biodiversity and fisheries. In human terms, these changes threaten livelihoods, cultural traditions, and economic activities dependent on stable climates and healthy ecosystems. Communities worldwide face increasing challenges from altered weather patterns, rising seas, and resource scarcity. Global efforts to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and transition to sustainable energy sources are essential to slow ice loss and preserve these climatic regulators. Adaptation strategies must also account for the cascading impacts on ecosystems and human societies. The melting ice invites reflection on the fragile interconnectedness of Earth's systems and humanity's role within them. It challenges us to act with foresight, humility, and collaboration to safeguard the planet's balance for future generations. The loss of Earth's ice profoundly reshapes the cultural landscapes of humanity, touching traditions, histories, and identities forged in frozen realms. Indigenous peoples of the Arctic and high mountains maintain deep spiritual and practical connections to ice-covered lands, viewing them as living entities intertwined with their heritage. The melting ice threatens not only physical environments but also the continuity of cultural knowledge passed through generations. For centuries, communities like the Inuit, Sami, and Tibetan Highlanders have adapted to seasonal cycles, navigating ice-covered seas, hunting migratory animals, and gathering medicinal plants unique to cold environments. These traditions form the foundation of social cohesion and identity, deeply embedded in stories, language, and ceremonies. As ice retreats, ecosystems transform, altering the availability of traditional food sources and challenging ways of life. Thinner ice makes travel hazardous, disrupting trade and communication. Changing animal migration patterns affect hunting and fishing practices. These shifts compel communities to adapt rapidly, balancing preservation of cultural heritage with new realities. Loss of ice also impacts sacred sites, burial grounds, and landscapes imbued with ancestral significance. Melting permafrost exposes artifacts and ancient remains, raising ethical questions about preservation and respect for heritage. In some cases, rapid environmental change threatens to erase cultural landmarks altogether. The intersection of climate change and cultural survival underscores the importance of indigenous knowledge in environmental stewardship. Traditional ecological knowledge offers insights into sustainable resource management and resilience, complementing scientific approaches. Efforts to support indigenous communities involve protecting land rights, fostering participation in climate policy, and promoting cultural revitalization. Collaborative initiatives empower local voices and ensure that adaptation strategies honor cultural values. Beyond indigenous populations, the melting ice evokes a broader cultural reckoning. It inspires art, literature, and storytelling that reflect loss, hope, and interconnectedness. These creative expressions deepen public awareness and emotional engagement with environmental issues. The vanishing ice challenges humanity to recognize the intrinsic value of diverse cultures and the ecosystems they inhabit. It calls for solidarity and respect across cultures to address shared challenges. In this transformation, culture becomes both a repository of wisdom and a beacon guiding collective action toward a more just and sustainable future. The vast stores of freshwater locked within Earth's glaciers and ice sheets represent a critical component of the planet's hydrological cycle, sustaining ecosystems, agriculture, and human consumption. The rapid melting of these frozen reservoirs disrupts this delicate balance, threatening water security on a global scale. As ice melts, initially there may be a surge of fresh water flowing into rivers and oceans, causing flooding and altering habitats. However, over time, as glaciers diminish and vanish, the seasonal replenishment of freshwater dwindles. This decline places immense pressure on communities dependent on glacier-fed rivers, particularly in arid and semi-arid regions. Mountain glaciers, often called water towers of the world, supply water to billions during dry seasons. Their retreat signals reduced availability during times of greatest need, threatening food production and livelihoods. Regions such as South Asia, the Andes, and Central Asia face heightened risks of water scarcity and conflict. The loss of glacial meltwater also impacts hydropower generation, critical for renewable energy production in many countries. Fluctuations in water flow compromise energy reliability, prompting shifts toward diversification and conservation. Ecosystems adapted to predictable water cycles experience stress as altered flows disrupt breeding, feeding, and migration patterns. Wetlands, forests, and grasslands all depend on seasonal water availability, linking ice melt to broader biodiversity changes. In urban centers, rising sea levels combined with freshwater shortages compound challenges in water management. Saltwater intrusion into aquifers threatens potable water supplies, requiring costly infrastructure and innovative solutions. Global water governance faces increasing complexity, demanding integrated management of transboundary basins and cooperation among diverse stakeholders. Technologies such as desalination, water recycling, and efficient irrigation provide partial relief, but must be coupled with sustainable policies. The melting ice highlights water as a shared, finite resource vital to all life. It demands renewed commitment to conservation, equity, and resilience in the face of changing climates. By safeguarding freshwater sources and promoting responsible stewardship, humanity can navigate these challenges and secure a stable water future. The dramatic transformation of Earth's cryosphere reshapes ocean ecosystems in profound ways, creating ripples that extend from microscopic plankton to the largest marine mammals. Melting ice introduces vast amounts of fresh water into the seas, altering salinity, temperature, and nutrient cycles, key factors governing ocean life. As glaciers and ice sheets retreat, the influx of cold, fresh water stratifies the ocean's surface, limiting the mixing of nutrient-rich deep waters with sunlit layers where photosynthesis occurs. This disruption hampers the growth of phytoplankton, the foundation of marine food webs, affecting fish populations and the species that depend on them. Moreover, warmer temperatures shift species distributions, with cold-adapted organisms retreating toward poles and warmer water species expanding into new habitats. This redistribution changes predator-prey dynamics, breeding grounds, and migratory routes, challenging the resilience of marine communities. Polar regions, once dominated by sea ice ecosystems teeming with life adapted to extreme conditions, face rapid habitat loss. Ice algae, krill, and other keystone species decline, jeopardizing seabirds, seals, and whales reliant on these food sources. Ocean acidification, Driven by increased atmospheric CO2 absorption, compounds stress on marine organisms by disrupting shell formation and reproductive cycles. Combined with temperature changes, acidification threatens coral reefs, mollusks, and plankton, with cascading effects through food chains. Fisheries, crucial for global food security and economies, confront uncertainty as target species shift locations and abundance fluctuates. Coastal communities dependent on fishing livelihoods must adapt to these ecological upheavals. Conservation. Efforts increasingly emphasize marine protected areas, sustainable fisheries management, and climate mitigation to preserve ocean health. Scientific research plays a critical role in understanding ecosystem responses and guiding policy. The melting ice thus acts as a catalyst, accelerating changes in the oceans that connect all life on Earth. It reveals the intricate bonds between cryosphere and biosphere, urging comprehensive action to protect these intertwined systems. In Ever, recognizing the ocean's vulnerability, humanity is called to embrace stewardship that honors the ocean's role as a life-giving force and climate regulator. The relentless melting of Earth's ice encapsulates not only a tale of loss, but also a call to action, a profound challenge to the very fabric of human existence and planetary health. It demands a reckoning with our collective choices and an urgent embrace of sustainable pathways that honor the delicate balance of life. As sea levels rise, ecosystems transform, and cultures adapt, humanity stands at a crossroads. The decisions made today will echo through generations, shaping the destiny of Earth's intricate web of life. Mitigation efforts, reducing greenhouse gas emissions, transitioning to renewable energy, and protecting natural carbon sinks are essential to slow the pace of ice loss. Adaptation strategies, enhancing resilience of communities, safeguarding water resources, and preserving biodiversity must accompany these efforts to navigate inevitable changes. Global cooperation, grounded in science, equity, and respect for diverse perspectives, forms the cornerstone of effective climate action. Indigenous knowledge and local experiences enrich solutions, reminding us that humanity is inseparable from nature. Innovations in technology, policy, and education offer tools to transform economies and societies toward sustainability. Yet the heart of the response lies in a shared commitment to stewardship and reverence for the Earth. The story of melting ice is a mirror reflecting humanity's impact and potential. It invites us to cultivate hope through action, recognizing that each step taken to protect the planet strengthens the bonds that sustain all life. In this unfolding chapter, resilience is forged not only in infrastructure, but in spirit, in community, and in the profound understanding that Earth's future rests in human hands. Let this awareness inspire generations to come, guiding a journey toward harmony, balance, and a thriving planet where ice continues to gleam beneath the skies.